Good morning or good afternoon, head start, I guess, depending on where you are.
I
Let's
don't neither. That'd be too long.
let me give it another minute or so to let a couple more people come in and then we will get going. Hello, Shonda. You're on my, out of all the people, you're right there. I'm so happy to see you smiling. Mhm. Mhm. Oh, the host has spotlighted me. That's scary. Well, good morning or good afternoon again, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I am Bob Beeson, NHSA's Senior Director of Government Affairs, and welcome to today's um, Lunch and Learn series on appropriations. So I was just joking with Courtney before we got on. I always like to update one of the pictures on this front slide. So the picture in the upper left, if we are supposed to believe the weather forecasters, is what the Capitol is going to look like tomorrow morning. So snow days don't exist anymore except for kids. We just all work at home anyway. So it is what it is. But if you are traveling anywhere in the mid-Atlantic or the Midwest today, be careful. And be careful on the roads with all the snow. So thank you everybody for joining us today. We added this to our Lunch and Learn series because we are always getting lots of questions about appropriations or just appropes if you want to save 3 syllables every time you are saying it. So I want to apologize in advance if this goes a little deep into the weeds, but I think it's useful to give you a little bit of background on exactly what appropriations is, where it comes from, what it means, and you're going to get a copy of all these slides after the presentation, probably later today or tomorrow. But my contact information is included in there. So if you have any questions afterwards, please yell. If you have any questions as we go through the presentation, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So let's dig in before we have to start shoveling out. So, appropriations, what are they and how did they originate? So, first, a little bit of background. The Constitution in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 lays out what is appropriations and what Congress must do, etc. There is more before this, there is more after this, but that is the basics where appropriations made by law comes from. If you have attended one of our leadership institutes and you have heard me or one of my colleagues introduce Michael Higdon, our appropriations lobbyist from A19 Strategies, you now know where A19 comes from. Article 1, Section 9. Michael is an appropriations guy. That is what he has done and continues to do for us. So that's where that comes from. To build on this a little bit, the Supreme Court has been asked to look at this clause of the Constitution on a number of occasions and has repeatedly said that Congress has the power of the purse and that no money can be paid out by the treasury, gee, easy for me to say, by the Treasury unless Congress has stipulated it to be done by an act of Congress that is signed into law by the president. Now, you may have heard in the news since the new administration has taken over that the Trump administration is seeking to what is called impound funds. And they are looking at an opportunity or the ability to, if Congress says that X program is going to get $100 million, to only give them 90 million or 80 million or 70 million, and either not spend or repurpose, I'm not quite sure on that, those remaining funds. So we could get into a lengthy conversation on that, but I'm going to wait and let the courts decide that. But when you hear the word impoundment or impounding, um, that is what the media and everybody else that you might hear talking about it refer it to. Um, I am sharing action photos wherever possible, although action is kind of a broad expanse of the word right there. But this is Rosa DeLauro on the slide at a Head Start program in New Haven, Connecticut. Rosa is the ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee. So the members of Congress that you see on your screen as we go through this, I will try to always make sure and say who they are and why they're important. But Rosa is a long time appropriator and Head Start fan. So now that we know what the Constitution says appropriations is, what is Congress supposed to do? They are to pass annually 12 different appropriations bills. In a couple minutes, we will get to the specifics of them. They are supposed to pass them annually for a fiscal year that runs from October 1st until September 30th of the following year, under the jurisdiction of the House and Senate Appropriations Committees. That sounds very straightforward, pretty understandable. Unfortunately, Congress has not been able to get out of their own way and hasn't passed all of these individual appropriations bills in a number of years. Hence, things like supplemental appropriations, continuing resolutions, etc., that we will talk about in a minute. So the 12 subcommittees are Ag, Commerce, Science, Justice, Defense, Energy and Water, Financial Services, Homeland Security, Interior, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, and related agencies. That is the subcommittee which deals with Head Start. We call it Labor H for short because a lot of these have way too long of names. Then you also have legislative branch, military construction, national security, and transportation. That has another one of my fun acronyms. The Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Bill is often referred to as THUD. You can see it if you look at the capitalized letters in the name. So, the bill that we are primarily concerned about each and every year is the Labor, Health and Human Services subcommittee. So here are the appropriations leaders in Congress. On the Senate side, you have Susan Collins and Patty Murray, who lead the Senate, the full committee, and Shelley Moore Capito and Tammy Baldwin, who lead the subcommittee, the Labor H subcommittee. You'll see that Patty Murray there is listed as vice chair rather than ranking member of the subcommittee. The reason is that in the full appropriations committee in the Senate is one of only two committees on the Hill where, instead of referring to the ranking member as the ranking member, the leader of the opposition party in that committee, they refer to them as vice chair. And I will say that in terms of Head Start, That has done us very well. The In the past number of years, the um, Senate is always a more collegial body. They work a lot better together. They do a lot of things on a very cooperative basis. And as a result, knock on wood, this will continue. Head Start has fared generally better in the Senate than it has in the House. Speaking of the House, the chair of the full committee is Tom Cole from Oklahoma. Rosa DeLauro is the ranking member of the full committee and of the Labor H subcommittee. The chair of the full committee in the House can also take the helm of a subcommittee, and Rosa, either as chair or ranking member, has been the ranking member or has been the leader on the Labor H subcommittee for many years now. Bob Adderholt from Alabama is the chair. So when you hear us talking about congressional appropriations leaders, these are the keys. Obviously, the John Thunes and the Chuck Schumers, the Mike Johnsons and the Hakeem Jeffries of the world are critical to everything that we are doing. But the people who are doing the block and tackling are really these 7 members of Congress and their staffs. They are the ones who are getting the work done and who we need to influence on a regular basis. So, there are, as I alluded to earlier, a number of different types of appropriations bills. There are the regular appropriations bills, where each subcommittee is responsible for one section, those 12 subcommittees that I laid out, for funding one section of the government on an annual basis. By law, they must be enacted by October 1. We keep seeming to miss that deadline. The picture here is Tom Cole from um, Oklahoma, the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. And he is in that picture accepting NHSA's Pledge Award during the Winter Leadership Institute in 2020. So we have a very good relationship with Mr. Cole and his staff. He is trying to corral a very varied bunch of individuals in the House, but we are glad that we have somebody that is heading up Head Start, or that is supporting Head Start so strongly, heading up that committee. There are also continuing resolutions. That is what we are under right now. If Congress has not enacted its 12 regular appropriations bills by October 1, they can either shut things down or they can enact a continuing resolution or a CR. A CR will generally keep things funded at the same level as the previous fiscal year, perhaps with some minor modifications for a set amount of time. This year, there was a CR that went until just before Christmas, and we are now under one that is set to expire from or on March 14th. In this picture, second from the right is Senator Susan Collins from Maine. That is, she's meeting with Head Start leaders from Maine during our Fall Leadership Institute back in 2023. The final type of resolution, or excuse me, of appropriations bills are supplemental appropriations. You hear that every once in a while. You heard about them when they talk about disaster relief. You hear about them when they're talking about pandemic support. You hear about them when they're talking about adding funds for military slash defense assistance to um, Ukraine and other places. Those are used to add funds in during the course of the fiscal year that had not been included during the regular appropriations process. Um, they can be, you hear sometimes about appropriations bills, especially supplemental bills or omnibus bills, being referred to as Christmas trees. That is because when a bill like this gets moving, it sometimes becomes decorated with lots of other unrelated funding requests or other pieces of legislation. So they can become more than a little contentious. The photo here, the woman holding, you can't really see it there. It's tough to see on the left side, standing in the back, is Patty Murray, who is currently the vice chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. I have no idea who the tall guy with the long hair is in the back, but he's an awfully good looking guy. Um, so what if Congress fails to pass the appropriations bills or a continuing resolution, or if they pass it and it gets to Congress or it gets to the president and the president either vetoes it or refuses to sign it, what does that mean? That means that there could potentially be a government shutdown. There have been about a dozen government shutdowns in the last 20 some years. Some of them have been as short as 4 hours. Some of them have been as long as the most recent one, which is from December of 2018 into January of 2019, and that lasted 35 days. I'm sure you may have seen over the weekend there has been some discussion about the potential for a shutdown at the end of this current CR. We're not there yet. We are keeping an eye on it, but we are not worried about that just yet. So how does Head Start and NHSA advocate for funding in appropriations each year? This picture is Congressman Bob Adderholt from Alabama, who was the chair of the Labor H subcommittee in the House. He is the chair of one of the two committees where the two subcommittees where Head Start is going to be initially discussed, and the the conversations about funding from for the next fiscal year will be addressed. We start off the year in advance of those committee meetings by reaching out across the Hill and gathering as many appropriations request forms as we can and submitting those to as many members of Congress as possible. There are some members who do not accept appropriations requests. They make all their decisions on their own without any outside input. There are some that we know who have said they are opposed to additional funding to Head Start. They want to block grant Head Start or something like that. So we don't include them. There are some who have very specific forms that need to be submitted solely by somebody from their congressional district or something like that. But last year, for example, we submitted something like 340 appropriations requests across the Hill. We also make an effort to try to get a member of the Head Start community testify before each of these subcommittees in support of Head Start funding priorities. The issue with that is there are normally dozens, if not hundreds, of entities that submit requests to testify before these hearings, and usually it is 5 or 6 total that get chosen. So 5 or 6 in the House, 5 or 6 in the Senate. You've got, 10 or 12 chances out of 1,000 plus to be chosen to testify. But even if we are not chosen to testify, every organization is given the opportunity to submit written testimony. And we do that every year. We work very closely looking at who which members are going to be really influential that year. It's quite often the subcommittee chairs and things like that, but it might be somebody who's a little bit farther down the dais on the committee who has got an outsized role or something like that. But I do know, for example, that 2 years ago, our outside witness testimony to Mr. Adderholt's committee was submitted by Community Action of North Alabama. So that gives you an idea of the types of entities that we are working with to get that submitted. Then after we get out of subcommittee, we get to the full committee. I should have been thinking about this when I put another subcommittee chairman up there. The woman in the center is Tammy Baldwin, who is the chair, the ranking member of the Senate subcommittee on Labor H. We work with folks on the Hill to get letters of support that are being sent to the Appropriations Committee chairs and ranking members outlining our requests for the coming year. We generally get between 160 and 170 Democrats in the House to sign onto our bill. We used to get in the high teens or in the 20s of Republicans to sign on to our letter. Last year, we got, I think, 32 or 34. I have to go back and look. But we continue to try to get as many signatures on those as we can. We will ask you and all of your parents, your staff, your alumni, etc., to submit emails into Capitol Hill offices, especially those of the members of the appropriations committees. And depending on the circumstances as we're working through this, we may also seek report language. There is when an appropriations bill gets passed, um, the it's often a few hundred, each bill is a few hundred pages long. In addition to that, there is a report that comes out from each committee that supplements that explains the thinking and the other things that the committee is asking the administration to do with that. Last year there was report language that talked about expanding eligibility for migrant and seasonal and tribal programs. There has been other things in the past that have addressed QIF funds and things like that. So we may ask for report language that is something that might not necessarily have to do with funding, but does carry the impact of law because it is explaining what the intent of the committee is to the administration. So we may seek that as well. Then when we finally get through the subcommittees and the full committees, in a perfect world, it gets to a conference committee. The woman sitting here reading the book to the kids at a Head Start program is Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia, who is the chair of the Senate Labor H subcommittee. She is another um, really, really great supporter of Head Start, and she and her staff have been great to work with. Once we know which of the chamber's bills is most favorable to Head Start, we will be reaching out and asking folks on the Hill to support that chamber's funding. We will be asking them to reach out to their colleagues on Appropriations Committee, especially the leadership who are likely to be serving or participating in the conference committee, and urge them to support the funding which we think is better. We will continue to meet with members and staff and generate emails into those offices. You are obviously going to be critical to that. So we get through all of that, and with any luck, the president signs a bill which is good for Head Start. Um, it's not always as good for Head Start as we would hope, but we continue to push it and try to do as good as we can for all of you to benefit your programs and your staff. So what's going on right now? Well, um, you know, there's a lot going on right now. We have not yet finished fiscal year 2025. As I said earlier, we're working under this CR, keeping spending at FY24 letters. That CR is set to expire on the 14th of March. Unfortunately, the leadership in the House and Senate Approps committees haven't agreed on what they call top line numbers, which is the total amount of spending in those bills. So as a result, they have not been able to break that top line up into the 12 different subcommittees and ask them to work on resolving the differences. So as I said before, we look at the two bills and decide which one we are going to advocate on behalf of. This one was an easy one this year. The House bill includes it includes a $25 million increase in funding for Head Start. Um, that's basically a step backwards. It doesn't have a COLA. Matter of fact, it's losing money because that is below the rate of inflation. We we applaud the fact that the House had a de minimis increase in its bill as opposed to the cut that they were advocating for last year, but it's really not going to do us a lot of good. The Senate version, on the other hand, calls for a $700 million increase for Head Start. We have continued to advocate for that piece of legislation in what they are doing moving forward, and we'll continue to do that. Fiscal year 2026, well, even with FY25 incomplete, Doge is doging. I don't know what other way to explain it in terms of what is going on there. And reconciliation, which is a whole nother budget maneuver that both parties have used when they've had control, is on the horizon. Preparations for FY26 are underway. We sent out early last week an email to the Hill to gather request forms. On the first day, I think my colleague Tamar said she got about 200 forms back. We have secured leaders for most of our Hill letters. We are working through who we are going to ask to submit outside witness testimony, and Hill meetings continue to fill my calendar. both virtually and in person. I've got a number of virtual ones on my calendar today, and I'm going up to the hill to do in-person meetings later this week. So that is that is what appropriations is all about. The final picture is some guy named Bob Beeson speaking to a Head Start class in his hometown of La Crescent, Minnesota, when he flew home to visit his dad for his birthday. So, just to show you that I have been in the classroom and trying to do on a very, very, very small level what all of you have been doing. So, again, I hope this is not too deep in the weeds. I hope it answers some of the questions that I and my colleagues are getting all of the time on Head Start, or excuse me, on appropriations. Courtney, I have not been paying attention to anything in the chat. Are there any questions? I know I've gone over time. I apologize, but are there any questions that I need to address?
Yes, one question, not necessarily related to appropriations, but do you know if the administration has been in talks to appoint a new director of OHS?
I don't know that they have. I would guess that there have probably been some initial conversations, but they, the first thing that they need to do is they need to get ahead of HHS in place. Um, RFK Jr. is going to have a final vote. I think it's going to be late tomorrow night or maybe into Thursday. And once he gets into place, that will, in theory, allow for some of the other dominoes to start to fall and for other positions to be filled. We have not seen anything um, on who that might be, um, but you know, I will say two things. Number one, in the past, whether it's Democrat or Republican, it generally takes a while before they get down to the level of of the OHS director. I will say this: there is a gentleman who had worked for Senator Cassidy from Louisiana on the Health Committee, which is the committee that authorizes Head Start, who has been appointed as the principal deputy secretary for ACF. Um, he is somebody that I and a number of my colleagues have worked with in the past. He is generally a very positive on issues related to Head Start. So we do have an ally that is in there right now, and we'll continue to work with him until there is a director in place. Anything else that I missed, Courtney?
I think that's all, and we will see folks next month, March 11th at 12 o'clock p.m. for our federal to local funding. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.